Hey guys, it's Jane. It's Friday and I'm back for a Friday Reads. I read a few things this week, but I don't have a huge amount to say about most of them. So this might end up being a quick one, although I often think that, and it usually isn't the case. So let's just see how it goes. The first thing I finished this week is Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express. I talked about this last week. I was reading it for my In Real Life book club. I don't really have much to say. It's a classic Christie. I just want to tell a little story, and it's got a little moral, and the moral is don't be that person. Okay, if the opportunity ever arises for you in your life, just don't be that person. As I said, we read it for my In Real Life book club. So we all got to group Tuesday night, and the partner of the person who was hosting the book club rocked up to the group quasi uninvited, hadn't read the book, and made a big deal about the fact that they didn't want to be spoiled for the movie. So could we not talk about any of the details of who done it? So yeah, in short, don't be that person. Is there anything else to say? So moving on. After that, I read probably the most interesting book that I've read this week, so I might leave that to a little bit later. I'll run through the other two first. I read A Conspiracy in Belgravia, which is the second of the Lady Sherlock series. I can't remember the name of the first one. I read it earlier in this year or last year. It is a gender-swapped Sherlock Holmes retelling. Now, for anybody who immediately says, aha, well then I think that this book is for you. But if you feel like you need to be sold further than a gender-swapped Sherlock Holmes retelling, I'm not 100% certain I am going to be the one to sell it to you, because it wasn't bad, but it wasn't mind-blowing. Like in the first one, I felt like there was a little bit too much going on. Too many characters with too many different things at stake for each of them, and it worked, but just, and it was a bit frenetic. Look, I really enjoyed it, and if the third one was out, which as far as I can tell is not yet out, if the third one was out, I would go and get it and read it. So I certainly enjoyed it, and I like the characters, and I was on board, and there were a couple of things that happened in the story which surprised me, which is always enjoyable. But yeah, I think that the author could do with just taking a bit of a chill and maybe removing one or two plot threads because it's a bit everything going on. So there was that. After that, I felt I wanted something a bit more relaxing, and I went and looked in my library, just looking at their recent purchases actually, and they just went and bought a whole bunch of the earlier Discworld books on ebook. And so I was like, okay, let's fill in the gaps, because I've read lots of the Terry Pratchetts, but I haven't read every single one of them. I've kind of been doing them by thread rather than like from number one on. I actually read these, I started reading them pretty early. I think books 1 and 2 were out when I first encountered this series. So that is fairly early, not from day one, but still fairly early. And despite what some people will have you believe, there are better and worse ones. In some ways it feels like speaking ill of the dead to say that, but it's true. The one that I picked was Making Movies, which is a relatively early one. I've decided I'm going to read through the Industrial Revolution thread. There is this great graphic that lists the different Discworld books by theme, which I refer to, and I'll link that in that description if you're interested in figuring out where to start with them. Yeah, so Moving Pictures is not one of the all-time great Discworld books. It's not, there's nothing in there that is especially memorable except for Gaspard the Wonder Dog, who I am sure must be in other books as well, because the minute he appeared on the page I remembered him, and I'm pretty sure I hadn't read this one before. So there was that. The one book that I finished this week that was more than just a good read, it was actually really quite gripping, and there was a lot going on, and I would recommend science fiction readers to kind of get on board with it, is a new book out this year. I don't know that I've actually heard anybody talking about it on BookTube, but I have not been watching a huge amount of BookTube in the last few months, so maybe somebody else has done it and I just haven't come across it. It's called An Unkindness of Ghosts. The author is Rivers Solomon. The cover art doesn't give a lot away. I picked it up because it was another one of these new releases from my library, and it is quite something. It's a story set in a generation ship, although you only figure that out quite a bit in. It's not a mystery surprise or whatever, it's just it's one of those stories where they land you right in the middle of the story. They don't do the kind of big swoop in, describe the world from the beginning. So you're following a character who is she strikes me as somebody who's kind of on the spectrum. She was an orphan from like virtually birth. Her mother died the day that, or at least disappeared the day that she was born, and this girl has grown up on one of the lower decks of the generation ships. This particular generation ship is very class conscious and stratified. She is incredibly intelligent, very skillful in sort of medicine and science, and has made a connection with the surgeon, who is another really key character from the book. He is somebody who is one of the upper deck people, and he's somebody around whom there's kind of a mystique, almost a religious mystique. The worldview of the upper deckers, or the people who are in charge of the generation ship, has this kind of quasi-religious element to it. There is something wrong with the ship. That's another thing that becomes apparent as we go on. It turns out that the people who are supposedly in charge of the ship have really not, for some time past, really been doing terribly much. Everything's kind of automated. Will our hero be able to save the day? It's a really gripping read. The characters are really nicely drawn. I'll be interested to see more of Rivers Solomon's writing in future. So that is what I finished. That brings me up to date. I finished Moving Pictures this morning, so that brings me pretty much up to date. The other thing that happened this week is the book that I told you about last time arrived in the mail. That was very, very quick, don't you think? The Bakery Men Don't See. Here's my copy. It is a real old schooly kind of collection of recipes. It's a real little time capsule. I've decided that I'm going to make one of these for the family tonight. I've chosen Laura Spice, who I've never heard of her. Chosen her recipe contribution, Mrs. A-Liter's Apple Kuchen. So we're going to have a run at that. The list of ingredients doesn't include apples anywhere, but in the method it says fill very full with sliced apples. So I'm just going to have to guesstimate how many apples makes a big greased cake pan, which is another part of the method, very full. So I'll tell you how that goes. So yeah, I've been doing that. The book that I picked up when I finished Moving Pictures is Mark Sayers' Strange Days, Life in the Spirit in a Time of Upheaval. Again, I picked this up from my library off their recent acquisitions list. Mark Sayers is a local Melbourne writer and thinker. He's a Presbyterian, I believe, minister, a young guy. I've not met him, but I've heard about him before. I've not read any of his books. So far, it's really interesting. So I'll let you know if I get anything great and gripping out of that when I talk to you next week. I'm also planning on picking up Ann Leckie's new book in the Imperial Ratch world, which again I've forgotten the name of because I'm terrible with names. But yeah, that's it. That's me. That's what's going on. I'd love to hear what you guys are up to. If any of you read any of these books that I've talked about, I'd like to hear your thoughts. I hope you're all well, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.